doesn't take you a long time to create a successful business. It takes you a long time to become the person who's willing to do that. And I think that's so true because I think the first step is often the hardest one.
For sure. Yeah. And what is successful, right?
Yeah.
You got to define success for yourself. For 47 years, I defined success based on what the media in Hollywood said was success, and that was riches and money. So I thought, yeah, make a lot of money and you'll be happy. And I learned that nothing outside of yourself can really bring you happiness or success. So my definition of success has changed a lot.
What was absent in your life to make you realize it wasn't money?
That's a good question. What was absent? Self-love.
And how did you kind of come about that?
So 3.5 years ago, trying to get my son help for anxiety, I was on a Zoom call. And within the first literally 3 minutes of being on the Zoom call, this performance coach said, "You have a tic." And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" She's like, "You blink like crazy when you talk about your childhood. You may have some unresolved childhood trauma that's actually affecting your son's anxiety." And I'm like, "Me? No, no chance. I've been a single dad for years, never hit my kid, barely yell at him, never made fun of him like my dad did, take him everywhere. I'm always there in the morning, at night, take him to school, travel all over the country playing golf. So I doubt it, but okay, if you think so." Because at this point, Shiva, I was just like, "I'll do anything." So she's like, "Well, you can come out and work with my ex-Navy SEAL husband and me for a weekend in Park City." So I did it. And over the course of a weekend, actually a 3-hour session laying in this bed in an Airbnb bedroom, my life forever changed. And I realized the secret to life. And that is that as a child, very few of us have all of our needs met as a child. So when our needs aren't met, or we go through stressful times, or we're being bullied, or our parents aren't there, or they're fighting, or they're alcoholics, or they're depressed, or anxiety, we take it on ourselves. Because if it's our parents' fault, we're completely screwed, right? But if I'm getting hit with a belt like I was as a child and being made fun of, if it's my fault, I can control it. All I got to do is be a good boy, be a good human being, and dad will stop hitting me and start loving me and stop making fun of me. So we come up with these meanings and place the blame on ourselves. But here's the truth. It was never about us. Those meanings, Shiva, that we place, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not lovable. If I'm my authentic self, love will be taken. Those run through the course of your adult life, and cause depression, anxiety, obesity. I mean, why our hospitals are full, why the divorce rates between first and third marriages goes from 50 to 72%. It's why the wars are going on right now. So yeah, that's how I found out that I lacked self-love. And when you lack self-love, literally every part of your life is negatively affected. And you might be like, "Well, things are pretty good. I got a pretty good marriage." But we have a self-love quiz on our site that people can take in like 3 minutes at unlocklimitlessyou.com and figure it out. But if I was talking to the yoga instructor today, and she was telling me some things about her husband that were obvious signs that he lacked self-love. And I was like, "I don't know how good your marriage is. And I don't need to know how good your marriage is. But wherever it is, knowing what you just told me about him, if he did the work, your marriage is going to get way better. And by the way, there's no chance he's not affecting the children. Because if you have kids that misbehave, or they have anxiety, or they have bad grades, kids only misbehave for one reason: they lack connection with an adult. So if you want to figure out the cause of your child's problems, grab your spouse, go into the bathroom and look in the mirror. You're likely the reason. Notice I didn't say it's your fault. So by doing this work, Shiva, and going from what we do oftentimes in 5 weeks with our clients, as we take them from lack of self-love to extreme self-love, like everything changes. Just like I'm a perfect testament, brother. Everything in these last 3.5 years, I say I was literally and figuratively born again. There's hardly anything in my life that hasn't changed in a good way.
Mm-hmm. And I think the key, what you said there, is it's reason, not fault, right? It's, you might be the reason, not the fault. And I think where I can see it being difficult is many people, and I'm sure most parents at some point, attach that identity to themselves as a parent, right? So they want to be a good parent. So hearing that I might be the reason sounds like I might be a bad parent, right? So it's not your fault, it's but you might be the reason. And I think the way you were able to also understand, okay, there might be some subconscious cues here that since I hadn't resolved yet, then get, dispersed to the people around me, I think is incredibly eye-opening, like you said.
Man, you just said something that really, I never thought about this before. What parent doesn't want to be a good parent? The problem is 99% of them have no idea how to be a good parent. Look, I was a single dad. I literally went to court and fought for my kids for custody, right? I wanted to be the best parent ever. And I thought I was a really good parent. And I was a good parent. I was doing the best I could. But Shiva, when you lack self-love, there's no way you can affect your kids. So it's very similar to someone who wants to get help for depression, anxiety, and they're going to the therapist, or alcoholics, and they're going to the therapist, and the therapist is focusing on the conscious behavior and the symptoms. And that never fixes anything. So parents out there, if you have kids that struggle and you really want to be a good parent, the greatest gift you can ever give a child is to break this multi-generational curse. Because when we lack self-love, we partner with someone who lacks self-love. We get married, right? If you lack self-love, there's no way that your kids can have self-love, right? So what's the greatest gift you can give them? Break the multi-generational curse. How do you do that? You teach your child how to love themselves unconditionally. If you lack self-love, can you tell me how in the world you're going to teach your child? Look, I'm speaking to myself. I'm not criticizing or judging anyone. It was my story, right? I didn't lack self-love, so how could I teach my kids? Now, over the last 3.5 years, my kids are starting to change based on this new Brad, and they see me acting in a different way. And my relationship with my daughter has never been better, my 17-year-old daughter, all because I healed inside.
Yeah, I think that idea is definitely brushed upon. And I was going to say the same thing. This idea of generational trauma is definitely environmental and also to some extent genetic. I mean, if let's say your grandparents had a lot of stress, that, manifests physically as how they treated their kids, but also genetically, like, it affects your genes, it affects your livelihood. So I think understanding self-love allows you to then teach your kids probably the most liberating skill out of anything. I mean, more than making money, more than anything else. I mean, feeling whole and fulfilled is like you said, it's life-changing.
Yeah, what a great point. It's if you really want to teach your child something, teach them how to process their emotions, teach them how to love themselves, because you can teach them to make all the money in the world, but who cares if they're drug addicted or have been, married 3 times and have kids with anxiety? You mentioned it's genetic, and there's some debate around this. But if it is genetic, if you can really carry those things in your genes, and I'm not sure, you can change. They now know through neuroscience, you can change the makeup of your genes. So let me say something that's a similar story. How many times have you heard depression or alcoholism runs in my family, right? You've heard that, right? I'm going to say, and it's not me, I'm taking this from someone else, but I'm going to say that's absolute bullshit. It's not alcoholism or depression that runs in families. It's the associated trauma that those people inflict on the family. That's what's inherited in families.
Mindset.
Yeah. So I don't want people to play the victim and be like, well, my grandfather was an alcoholic, so that's why I'm an alcoholic. No, you're not an alcoholic because your grandfather's an alcoholic. You're an alcoholic because alcoholics create trauma in their children, and that trauma is passed down, not the alcoholism.
Something that I've been very much practicing is not beating myself up over a mistake, but understanding as to why I was wanting to make that mistake in the first place. So using your example of alcoholism, instead of many people want to change, and let's say somebody's drinking alcohol all the time, but the issue is you tend to beat yourself up. It's like, I relapsed, this or that. But if you start to look at, well, why is alcohol the craving? Yeah, to some extent, there's probably some biological need because you've created a dependency, but psychologically, maybe you're running from yourself. You don't feel whole. Maybe you had some traumatic event that you just can't process and deal with. And I think these escapisms is what people use because they were never taught how to process emotions and love themselves.
I mean, I said earlier, I found out the secret of life, but I think I got sidetracked and I didn't really finish it. You basically just unearthed the secret of life to happiness. And here it is. And we'll use alcoholism. Every negative behavior you have in your life, alcoholism, we could spend here another hour and go through literally an hour, but I'll name 5 more. Depression, anxiety, shutting down when your spouse comes to you with a problem, overeating, OCD, being afraid to show up in public speaking. I mean, not asking for a raise at work, taking things personally. All of these negative behaviors that you don't want is actually your mind's perceived solution to something that it thinks is worse sitting over here. When you do the work and we figure out what is this thing driving the negative behavior, it is always an untruth formed typically in childhood between the ages of like 0 and 7 or 0 and 10. So what we do is we show the brain how it's untrue by showing times in your life where it was totally untrue. When you do that, your brain can't hold an untruth and an untruth, a truth and an untruth, excuse me. So the untruth is literally rewritten through neuroplasticity. It's like going into cell A6 of an Excel spreadsheet, deleting the 4 and putting in a 5. So now you rewrite the untruth. Guess what happens to the negative behavior? It vanishes and goes forever because now there's nothing driving it. So what you were saying earlier, there's a reason you must be drinking. Yes. So every negative behavior you have in your life right now is not your fault. Your brain is actually doing what it's supposed to do, and that's moving it from pain to pleasure. It doesn't say what degree. It's just better than this thing over here. Alcoholism, depression, eating too much is better than facing this thing over here. But again, this thing over here is always just an untruth formed in those meanings from childhood. That's it. That's the secret to life. No drugs needed. There's no need for 100 million Americans to be on an antidepressant or anti-anxiety drug. You want to know why people spend $2 billion a year on weight loss and 98% of them fail? Because they don't know the underlying thing that caused them to be overweight in the first place. So yeah, they can lose 20 or 30 pounds or 100 pounds. How many people do you know have lost weight and put it back on? This is the reason. They haven't gone to the source because no one was born with an eating problem. No one was born with an addiction. No one was born with depression and anxiety. It was created as a coping mechanism.
Yeah. And going off of what you said, it also makes sense, right? As kids, we just go through life with the tools that we know how to use, right? So whether that's shutting ourselves down in an environment where we feel unsafe, and then later in life that continues. And I think unless we unmap that and unpack it, then that translates to other areas, like maybe a fear in public speaking or not speaking your mind when somebody says something rude to you, right? Because you feel safe when you're quiet. So things like that tend to happen because we are not given all the tools on how to process the emotion. So, I think, like you said, most people are in that boat because we weren't taught that.
100%. And no matter what you have that you think is a flaw of yours, like, oh, it's just me. I'm not affectionate. I don't like to be touched. I don't like to talk on stages. No, I'm not going over there. That is all. I don't like to use the word normal, but can't think of another word that's not normal behavior that you were born with. There is always an underlying issue.
Maybe natural.
What's that?
Natural.
Yeah.
It's not natural.
Natural. I love that. Good job there. Yeah, it's not natural. So I was deathly afraid to public speak. In fact, when I was like 22 years old, a good friend of mine, she got married and she asked me to read a Bible verse or like 3. I got up on that stage in this church. I remember like it was yesterday because I was so freaking nervous. I could barely read. My knees were shaking so much. I literally missed one of the 4 sentences of one of the verses. I was so nervous.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because if I messed up, someone would make fun of me just like my dad did. And we got to go back. Our brains have been around for 6 million years. And do you know that of those 6 million years, I think probably like 98% of those 6 million years, or probably 99%, we've lived in tribes. If you're in a tribe and you live in a tribe and the tribe leader is making fun of you, he probably doesn't really like you. So you're thinking, I might get kicked out of here.
Your risk of survival.
If you get kicked out of a tribe, what happens to you?
Yeah.
What
You're
happens?
done.
You
You're
die.
done.
You
Yeah.
die. So here's the thing. This is why it wasn't my fault. I didn't know at the time, and I beat myself up. And I was like, "What's wrong with you? You came and read a Bible passage, you idiot." That's what I was thinking.
Right.
Here's the thing. My subconscious was doing its job. It said, "Don't go on that stage, because if you go on that stage, remember what you learned as a child. If you mess up, someone's going to make fun of you, and then you might get kicked out." And that stage, that pulpit, that's like getting near death. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep you really nervous to keep you away from that. So as much as I was beating myself up, my brain at the time, with the knowledge that it had and the awareness, was doing exactly what it should have done. But it was unnatural. There was no reason for me to be nervous. It was all based on a story that was made up. Not made up. It was based on a meaning that wasn't true. And the meaning was that if I mess up, people will stop loving me. I'll get kicked out of the tribe and I'll die. No, I could go on stage and mess up. I messed up. No one disparaged me. No one kicked me off. So that's it. And that's just one example. But anything in your life that you're looking at right now that you're like, I'm not good at this, or I can't be affectionate, or whatever it is, if it's unnatural, it's not your fault. And there's nothing wrong with your brain. Your brain is actually operating perfectly. That's why it drives me crazy when I hear of all these disorders, all these attention deficit disorder. Well, you know what? Attention deficit disorder, just another example. Someone who had a perfect childhood that had all their needs met would never have ADD. Ask Dr. Gabor Mate. He wrote a book on it called I'm blanking on the name. Scattered Minds. ADD, another example. And people say it's a disorder. No, it's not. When you're young and some bad shit's happening, are you going to stick around to feel the pain, or are you going to disconnect from your brain? And then the subconscious brain doesn't know the difference between time. So now you're, as a 40-year-old, you're still thinking you're 6 inside your brain. So you disconnect. That's what ADD is. It's like just complete disconnection.
Yeah. And like you said, when you distill down fears, using your public speaking example, your brain thinks, I'm going to get kicked out, I'm going to be alone, and then I'm going to die, because you don't want to be alone, because your rate of survival decreases. But what's interesting is, when you learn this idea of that self-love that you said, then you feel comfortable being alone. And then you start to rewrite that narrative that you had been telling yourself, because you're like, if I'm alone, I'm okay. I'll make it. Something, I can keep moving forward. And then that overarching anxiety to public speak starts to go away a little bit, because I'll be okay no matter what happens. And I think that's part of one of the byproducts of that.
Yeah. Ram Dass said, you can't ever be lonely because you have yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's part of self-love and not being alone. But I think you get self-love by rewriting the story, but by telling yourself the true meaning. Look, I still public speak. Am I perfect? No. Am I night and day difference? Yes. I used to, when I played in what I deemed as an important golf tournament that started at like 9 o'clock, I would literally start drinking at like 7:30. I would probably have a blood alcohol level that would keep me from driving a car by like 9 a.m. I'm not proud of saying that, but it's okay, because again, I was doing the best I could. Now I'll go play in a golf tournament. I'll go play in a pickleball tournament. Do I get nervous? Yeah, a little bit, but it goes away, and I don't need to be drunk to play. And how I handle myself differently now, I handle myself with compassion, because I know that the nervousness isn't coming from the 51-year-old adult. It's coming from the scared 6-year-old little boy. So I just say, it's okay, Brad. I got you. We're safe, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. I see this a lot in the Indian community, because our culture is put at utmost importance. We really do value what, the people around us think, our society around us thinks. And there tends to be a lot of pressure from the top down. It's like, okay, well, everybody around me is going to think this. So then the parents tend to pressure the kid to do or conform in a certain way. So I mean, I see that all the time. And then what ends up happening is just this push down of generational stress, because they're just trying to operate life with the tools that they had. And I think a lot of people don't like to talk about it, because there's shame around, I used to drink all the time, or I used to smoke all the time. And it's just a coping mechanism that's all you knew. You knew there was an immediate relief if I do this. And that's what I need is I need relief.
Yeah.
And we didn't know how else to get it.
Pain to pleasure. That's what your brain's, it's doing exactly what it should be doing.
Right. And I think the biggest, do what?
Until it becomes aware. And now if you
Yeah.
listen to this podcast, now you have awareness. So you can't hide behind that anymore. You don't necessarily have to do the work, but now all change begins with awareness. You now know that there's a better way. Going to 3 decades of therapy and 50 different marriage counseling sessions, and in 3 hours, everything was healed. And in 30 years, I couldn't do it. There's a better way, guys. You don't have to go the route of drugs. You don't have to go the route of going and sitting on your therapist's couch every Tuesday at 11 a.m. for the next 6 years. You don't. It's quick. You just have to do the deep work and figure out what is that underlying untruth. And then there's a process to rewrite it.
And what do you say to people that are now trying to make a change, right? So what I find interesting is I used to think that my subconscious brain was wanting to do one thing and I want to do something else. And it felt like a fight until I realized what we're talking about, which is it's just doing what it's supposed to do, which is try to protect me with how it knows how, right? With its automatic systems. When I learned that, it's like, okay, well then it's a slow process to reprogram, right? So then it starts with a conscious awareness of where the problem really stemmed from, and then a conscious action plan to actually rewrite it, because you have to kind of catch yourself in negative talks. Otherwise, you'll go back to your old programming.
Yeah, I mean, just a fantastic statement, and I've got a good add-on to that. So you can make. So I'm holding up my hands now for those of you who can see, and if you can't, I just want to narrate. And they're about a foot apart. In that 3-hour session, if on my left hand is complete brokenness and on my right hand is enlightenment, in that literally 3.5 hours, I made this jump, and now my hands are like an inch apart. Now, am I perfect? Of course not. But for the rest of my life, I get to operate in this gap. And this gap is amazing because my life is so amazing in every area. So you make that jump. How do you continue on that journey? I created this thing called the Joy Regenerator. Again, it's on the resources page of our website. And it teaches you. My goal in life is to become completely liberated. And my definition of liberation is not to allow anyone or any situation to negatively impact me. So anytime I feel a negative emotion, it's like the equivalent of being a master chess player. You got to have some hard moves, right? So I gamify this now. Whenever I have a negative emotion, I run through this thing. When you have a negative emotion, number one, you're in fight or flight, which means you're not in the present moment. So I want you to do some deep breathing. 4 or 5 seconds in, hold for 4 or 5 seconds, out for 4 or 5 seconds, hold for 4 or 5 seconds, repeat that. And then say you're feeling, because when you have to state a feeling, when you're in fight or flight, you're in your amygdala, your monkey brain. When you have to identify something, you got to use your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain. So that's a hack to get you out of the fight or flight. So you just simply identify the emotion. I am feeling, not I am, but I am feeling, because emotions come and go. I am is an identity. I'm feeling sad. Then remember, it's a 6-year-old little boy that's feeling sad. So I say, it's okay, you're feeling sad. Then I ask myself, where does it come from? Well, I've done the work to figure this out. That might be a tough thing for people. It's not impossible, but tough. And that's what we do with our clients. We help them find the source. In my case, Shiva, every time I feel a negative emotion, which honestly isn't often, a couple times a week, maybe if that, and it comes and goes in seconds, is a thought always creates an emotion that creates a behavior. That's how we stay alive. So you see a lion, the thought is, oh shit, he's going to eat me. You get scared. It pumps blood to your legs so you can run, and you run away. So the thought that creates the sad emotion every time in me is, I'm not enough. So I ask myself, is that true? And the answer is always, no, it's not true. I am enough. So why am I going to be sad based on an emotion that's not true? So that's the practice you have to do. But in the initial work of identifying the underlying thing, you're going to get this huge aha and breakthrough in the first 3 to 5 hours of work. After that, then you have tools to kind of continue to move you on the path to keep you from going back, just like you said, to your old self. What we do is we put ourselves in invisible prisons. We're in the cell, but the interesting thing is the cell opens from the inside and we don't know it. Just like the parent who wants to be a good parent but doesn't know it. They're sitting in a cell, but they just don't know they can open the door and walk out.
Right, that it was never locked in the first place.
Never locked.
What do you say to people right? Because I find this to be somewhat difficult at times, is explaining to people why a change in mindset is a change in everything. Because a lot of people focus on, and we see this perpetuated by social media, but wealth, status, cars, right? And as a mindset coach, I'm just curious what you say, or if you do at all, say to people to make them understand how mindset is the fundamental building blocks where the rest of your life can be built on. Or do you just get clients that are already in that headspace?
I mean, you just said a lot, right?
I'm
There's a lot of stuff I can comment on. I hope I can remember it all. Let me just make a note here: fear, and then the entrepreneurial myth. So,
Yeah, I'm just trying to piece together, when you get a client, right? Are they ready to go, or is there limiting beliefs that you have to convince them that mindset is a
so let me address the fear thing, because
yeah.
you said you said something along the lines of, do they realize that it's going to affect all aspects of their life? So I had a client that we did the work, I don't know, 9 months ago, 8 months ago. I got to meet him in person, because usually I don't meet my clients in person. It's all virtual. It's like in the comfort of their own home or office. So I got to meet him, and he's just doing amazing, just a completely different human being in every way, shape, or form. But it's like 2 months before I actually met him in person, he was at the beach, and he was staying in a like a high rise. And he goes, Brad, he goes, it was really strange. I was on the balcony, and I wasn't afraid of heights. And my whole life I've been afraid of heights. He goes, is there any chance the work you and I did could have anything to do with this? I'm like, hello, yes, because it's just a fear. All of these issues we're talking about, Shiva, are fears. The fear of getting kicked out of the tribe, the fear of not being loved, the fear of being left alone, not enough. So once you solve the fear, you come to me with anxiety. I'm going to solve the anxiety. And then guess what? You're going to lose a bunch of weight. Your relationship with your spouse is going to get better. You're going to be a better business leader. So your financial source, your financial abundance is going to go up. Everything is going to change. So the second thing is, how do clients typically come to me? I have had a number of clients who didn't want to do the work because they told themselves that the I am enough is driving their financial success. I actually really only one client who just flatly had no success. He told me that. He goes, Brad, I don't want to fix this, because if I do, I'll lose my drive. And I'm like, no. I go, it's just the opposite. Entrepreneurs like myself and so many millions of others got into business thinking, if I can make 5 million, 10 million, whatever your number is, then I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be worthy. You can get to that place in 3 to 5 hours of work. Once you get to that state today, then the chances of you making $5 to $10 million go through the roof, because now you're not making money to prove your worth. You're making money to make an impact. And that's what's happened in my life. So yes, we have some people come that are scared because they think it will like derail them, but it won't. And some people are like, well, what if I change and my spouse doesn't? Like, does that mean that, what if we get divorced? And I go, look, put yourself in a position that you can't lose. If you get to a place where you have extreme self-love and your spouse won't change at all, you've got some decisions to make. You've got options now. Right now, with lack of self-love, if you leave her, guess what? You're going to go meet the same exact person. This was what most people do. I did it twice. It's not, the problem in relationships are never the actual relationship. It's the relationship each individual has with themselves.
Yeah, I think that's another thing. Indian culture tends to push for early marriage. And I remember in my early 20s thinking to myself, I just want to feel whole. Like, I couldn't imagine finding someone right now, because I just would be asking of them things that they couldn't give me, because I actually need to find that in myself, which I can say in hindsight, right? At the time of 21, I wasn't that wise, but in hindsight, I realized what I really needed was to look within. And once you have that, then you're at a different place when you approach marriage, partnership, relationship, or whatever, business, partnership, anything, is as an
Yeah. If you haven't gotten married and you're thinking about getting married, take the self-love quiz. And if you lack self-love, have your fiance or significant other take it. I'll bet you a nice steak dinner that they also lack self-love. Where do you think that marriage is going to end? It's going to end in codependency, one party becoming codependent, or it's going to end like mine in fighting and eventual divorce. So do the work. I mean, I tell everyone that are in marriages or not married yet, just do the work because you can't lose. One of my clients from 18 months ago came to me on the brink of divorce, and he's publicly stated that his marriage is great now. I never had a marriage counseling session. I never even met his wife. But what he did is he healed himself, and in healing himself, he was able to shine his light. And then she started the healing process based on, oh my God, who is this guy? Like, he's changing in ways I've never seen. And so here's the thing about intimate relationships. That's where childhood trauma will most rear its ugly head, but it's also the greatest place in the world to heal if you have two people who are willing to work together. So my partner now, we both have extreme self-love. That doesn't mean we have a perfect relationship, but we're each perfect in the sense of helping each other become, I don't even like the word perfect. I shouldn't have used that. We are each helpful to each other in becoming the best versions of ourselves that we possibly can. And we have, the joy regenerator I mentioned, the second part of that is Shiva or Susan or Sally. What you just did or said made me feel, it's not your fault, but it made me feel very sad. Can we talk about this so that we can become better connected and I can heal? That's different than any of my past relationships because I never would have said it. I just would have lashed out and then would have become a big fight that lasted for like 3 days or 4 days.
If someone is having difficulty with confrontation, do you think it stems back to what we've been talking about, fear?
When you say difficulty with confrontation, like they have a hard time going and saying something, how they feel, 100%, 100%. Because why would you ever be afraid to say something? You have a meaning that if I am my authentic self, love will get taken from me. So had a client that at 6 years old, he doesn't remember, but let's just say it was his mom wouldn't give him a cookie. For whatever reason, he told his mom, I hate you. She cried for 2 hours. Then dad came home from work and spanked him and said, don't you ever make mommy feel that way. So 2 primary needs as a kid, attachment. If you're not attached to your parents, they provide the food and water, you're going to die. So that's really important. The other one is authenticity, the ability to be yourself and feel your gut. So if you're in the prairie 2,000 years ago and you see the lion and you look at him and you don't follow your gut, you're going to be dead. So when mom yells at son and dad comes home, son says, oh my gosh, I have just upset the tribe leaders. I better never do that again or else I get kicked out, be lonely and die. So what do? I got to change the person I am. So then we put the mask on our face like I did for 47 years. And I tried to be someone who I wasn't because I was trying to survive. I was trying to hold that attachment in place as a child.
Yeah, and I think conversations like these make people very uncomfortable because, like we talked about, most people either are not aware that they need to do the work or they have been running for however many years, right? And I find having these conversations with people through podcasting is a bit easier because they can do it from the comforts of their own home or whatever without feeling the need to respond to somebody about, oh shit, like I have some issues.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure. They're the people that know they have issues and want to get help. They're the people who know they have issues and don't want to get help. And then there's people like me who for 47 years, I didn't think I had any issues. So what that I smoke weed every night for a couple of years? Who doesn't smoke weed? It's legal now, right? So what if I drank, heavily sometimes? Who doesn't? So what if I had kids with anxiety? A lot of kids have anxiety. So what if I lost $9 million making 5 business mistakes? Maybe I'm dumb. So what if I, 2 marriages didn't work out? I picked the wrong person. I had no idea. I was always trying to be a better human being, but until I tried to get my son help for anxiety, and I went through that 3-hour session with that guy, I had no idea I had a problem. I had an issue. And then I figured it out, and boy, did I want to change, and I changed in a big way.
Do you think healed people attract healed people or broken people?
Healed, typically healed.
You think so? Because my thought process was, well, broken people might seek you out for help.
I don't know the answer to this, but it might be just the opposite because their brokenness is actually seeking familiarity. And so they didn't have that person as a child. So, I play pickleball a lot. I might have an addiction to it.
Yeah.
It's a good addiction.
It's fun.
It's a good addiction, right? I'm on a march on a mission to become a 4.0 duper level. So anyway,
Huh?
it's here when you're like, do you think that someone that's unhealed would attract someone that's healed? And I play pickleball with a lot of people. And some of these people, you can just see the self-confidence and the lack of confidence and the every bad shot they hit. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm terrible. You're so great. Do you know how long I would want to be with someone like that in an intimate relationship? I mean, within minutes, I'd be like, no, I'm out of here. So no, it usually works that people match to the level of their trauma.
Yeah.
And if they're healed, they're going to most likely be attracting healed people in their lives.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people too, is our subconscious even seeks familiarity, like you said, which doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing, right? Because I used to think, why do I keep going back to this mindset if it's bad for me? Because it was familiar. It made me comfortable to feel bad, you know? So I think what you're saying here is super important about until you do the work that we've been talking about, you kind of stay in that familiar zone.
Yeah, your subconscious doesn't care if you're happy or sad. So you grow up in an abusive household, and then guess what? You get into an abusive relationship, and you're like, well, I don't want to be in an abusive relationship, but every relationship I seem to be in ends up that way. Well, guess what? Your brain, your subconscious mind is picking what's familiar to you. It doesn't mean it's what you want because it's keeping you alive. We kept you alive through that abuse, so we got to keep the abuse going. That's where your conscious mind overwrites your subconscious mind. That's how doing the work becomes aware of. When I was in this abusive relationship, I said, this is my fault. I'm no good. So I went and found people that were going to kind of recreate that for me.
100%. And that's also why if you were to use a crutch during a difficult time period and then you have another one and you haven't done work, you default to the crutch again because, like you said, your monkey brain, your subconscious brain doesn't care if you're happy or sad, cares if you're safe, cares if you're alive.
You got it.
Right. And I think that is a mind-blowing differentiator because once you understand that, then you realize, well, happiness is my choice and the brain is doing its job, which is to just keep me going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was playing in a pickleball tournament and my buddy got irritated because of a bad call. And he started repeating the mantra, I feel outstanding, I feel outstanding, I feel outstanding. And I didn't have the time or the place to get into psychology or coaching, right? But I was thinking, oh, that's interesting. And I started saying that, but my gut was telling me I should be saying, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. That's what we think we lack when we're feeling these negative emotions, that we're unsafe. Him getting upset by a call, he brought in meaning, and that meaning probably traced back thousands or millions of years to his brain, his primitive brain saying, they're not treating me right, so therefore I might be unsafe. So rather than saying I'm outstanding, I'm outstanding, I'm outstanding, a lot of times if I feel any anxiety, I'll just be like, Brad, you're safe, brother. I got you. I got you. You're okay. It comes down to the fear. So just tell yourself, you're safe. You're safe. You're safe. You're safe 1,000 times if you have to.
Yeah. And it kind of makes sense why this fear would even stem from our brains because the universe, the world, I mean, it's a huge space all the way from like microscopic, atoms to planets and universes. So we feel very tiny, which is why we probably built tribes to also feel a sense of safety. And probably through time, we needed to also find that in ourselves. And I don't know if tribes back in the day focused on self-love or at all, but I think in our modern society, as we become more isolated, it definitely is important today.
Yeah, I bet it was more around survival, like from
Yeah.
the elements and the animals.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also, they from what I've understood is they also did a lot of spiritual practices and stuff. So maybe there was a lot of emphasis on understanding internals too.
Well, for sure. I mean, I don't know if you can go back millions of years and say that, but certainly thousands of years, because
Yeah.
I mean, Buddha and yeah, so there's been a lot going on for a long time.
Yeah. Now, what would you say would be the action item here for someone listening that wants to start the journey? Because this might seem very overwhelming to someone who is like, okay, self-love makes sense, but what does that even mean?
Yeah, so all change begins with awareness. So whether you work with me or not, or Yvonne, it doesn't matter. I won't say I care less, because I do. I'd love to help you, but all I want you to do is get help. And if you're suffering, you don't deserve to be suffering. So at least have the awareness. If you go take the self-love quiz, it's going to show you if you have these limiting hidden beliefs that are driving your behavior. And then from there, there's 1,000 ways you can go. You can talk to me. You can go, talk to my partner. You can go to a local therapist. You can go to a life coach. You can go to a healer. You can try the ayahuasca route. I mean, there's all kinds of things out there. You can do meditation. You can do yoga, but nothing. The one thing you have to do is you've got to figure out the untruth that's driving the negative behavior. And you've got to rewrite that neural programming. And there's something called memory reconsolidation, which is your brain's ability to do that. But it doesn't just happen by you identifying it and saying it. You've got to get yourself in a state. And I don't know if this can be done alone. It probably can. But you've got to, let's say that you're coming to me for anxiety. I'm going to get you into that anxious state where you're like at a 9. And then we're going to figure out the underlying untruth. And then I'm going to show you while you're in that state. And why do I want you in that state? Because that's when your neurons are labile, which means changeable. So while you're in this anxious state, I'm going to show you times where, let's use me as an example. If I go up on stage and I mess up, people will make fun of me and they'll kick me out. So I would show myself times in my life while I'm in this anxious state of when I have messed up and people continue to love me. And then boom, boom, boom. And I would do that 3 different times with 3 different stories. Then a mismatch detector goes off. And then that's the memory reconsolidation taking place. That's the rewriting.
Are
So
you sharing your stories or asking them to come up with stories that they had?
it's theirs. But here's the beautiful thing. The mind doesn't know the difference between reality and imaginary. So if we can't find stories, we literally just make them up. It's incredible how the brain works. I mean, you've probably heard these stories of like the famous story, I think books have been written on him, of the POW in Vietnam who came back and like played this amazing round of golf, and he hadn't played in 8 years. And his buddies were like, what the heck? You haven't played in 15 years or 8 years, whatever. It was a long period of time. He goes, no. He goes, I played every single day. He goes, I got up, I had my coffee with my wife. I put my shoes on, I took my shower, he literally every day for hours walked through everything, hitting each shot, looking at the wind, getting his clubs out of the cart, everything, having the beer at the end of the round. They've done studies where they had cohorts lift weights and then the others didn't lift weights, but they thought about lifting weights. Their muscle mass increased. Like the brain
Yeah, I've
is
seen that.
so powerful. It's incredible. So that's it. That memory reconsolidation is really important to get, 1, transformative, fast change, and 2, maybe even more importantly, is the lasting change.
Yeah. Like you said, the brain is powerful, which means you're powerful, right?
Yeah.
And it's so unfortunate because so many people have dreams and it gets pressed down over many years of what I think is a projection from somebody else, right? If you want to start a business, somebody else might say, how could you do that? You don't have any experience, but it's just their own limiting belief of fear of, if I start and fail, I won't have money, I won't have anybody, I'll die. Like kind of distilling it all the way back. And it's projecting that fear to you. And then you start thinking, oh, well, maybe they're right. Maybe, what if that happens to me? And I think that's just so unfortunate because once you find self-love, you realize there's not a lot of things to be afraid of,
There's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
I'm reading this book called The Journey of Souls, and it's all about how our souls picked our journeys here on earth. And Jesus, it doesn't say this, but the gentleman that took me through my transformation, talked about how Jesus came down from heaven knowing he was going to face the trauma of the cross, but he did it so that he could find his truths, so that he could share those truths with others, so that they could find their truths and in turn be better connected to themselves and then God. So this book is absolutely amazing, and I kind of lost my train of thought, but it's all around that we pick our we this is all this shit's happening for us, and so you can. I don't really see. I try so hard not to see any good or bad anymore. Like I get a flat tire and I can't go work out or play golf with my buddies. Okay, well, what if that flat tire kept me from driving into traffic and getting hit and killed? So you can live your life like this starting right now. It's a phenomenal way to live your life.
It's like the boy and the horse story I'm sure you've heard of. Like this old man gets a horse and everybody says, "Wow, you're so lucky." And he says, "Maybe." And then, his son rides the horse, falls off, breaks his leg. They say he's unlucky. He says, "Maybe." Then they try to draft people and he had a broken leg, so his son doesn't get drafted. And it goes back and forth. And it's like the whole point is, well, you don't know, right? You don't know if an event is good or bad, but I think another big truth on top of self-love is just being present. And I think those two aspects will give you a very satisfied and fulfilled life. Because if you can just do what you're doing in the moment and not be anxious, not be depressed, and just have self-love and be there, I think that's the
But
beauty.
It's almost nearly impossible to be present when you have these hidden limiting beliefs because you're in a traumatic state. You're in a fight or flight. So you're never present. My memory just came back to me. It usually does. Here's a hack for you. If you can't remember something, don't sit there and try to have your conscious brain recall it. Simply say, it will come back to me, and then move on, and your subconscious brain will actually go grab it for you. So it just did that for me. You talked about fear, and why I went to the Journey of Souls book is that I was brought up Catholic, which means you were taught you were born, you die, you either go to heaven or hell, and that's it. You just stay in heaven for the rest of your life. I don't believe that anymore. And this Journey of Souls talks about that, how our souls have been here for thousands of years, and they'll be here again, or thousands of lives, and they'll be here again. So I don't even fear death because they've had so many near-death experiences. And this Journey of Souls is actually a hypnotist who did past life regression. And he did thousands of people over his career, and so many things were similar. I mean, there was another lady that did them, and they literally, this is crazy. This is so hard to believe. You don't have to believe it. It was in her book, Dolores Cannon. She plotted everything on a map, and she would take notes. And one person would be like, I'm making this up, in Mesopotamia, and in blah, blah, blah year, I was standing at the square and there was a red tree there. And then another person, like 10 years later, would say the same exact thing. Oh, there was a red tree in this place. So there's nothing to fear. The only fears we were born with were fear of falling down and fear of loud noises. Everything else were learned. So if you can just live a life with no fear, what's the difference? What's opposite of fear? It's love. So if you just live in love, there is nothing to fear, because God forbid you die tomorrow. Like a lot of people think, my God, that's the worst thing ever. It's the same thing as the flat tire. How do you know it's the worst thing ever? Our souls are energy. You don't destroy energy. It goes somewhere. So what if I'm going to spirit land and then I'm going to come back in the body of someone else and I'm going to get to live again? And what if my soul picked, in one of these books was like, the soul was like, hey, can you be the person who runs into me as a drunk driver? And they're like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that role. And the person's like, no, that's going to be the ultimate forgiveness. In this lifetime, I have to work on forgiveness.
The human experience is very interesting. It's kind of what this whole show has been themed around over time, because I've talked to various guests, entrepreneurs, people in media, and all sorts of things. And it all distills back down to the same fundamentals of, what really is wealthy. We're all seeking just a fulfilled life. And I think what's so profound about the human experience is we are living on earth to decipher between the heaven and hell which we create. And I mean, it's all just mindset. I mean, you could have heaven on earth or hell on earth, and it's just based on the way you perceive the world around you.
Yeah.
And I think that's crazy.
You talked about presence. Well, true presence, being here right now, is heaven on earth. If you're not worried about what happened in the past and you're not worried and you're just right here, nothing bad is ever usually happening right here. We're worried about the rent that we have to pay in a month from now. Well, what good does it do to worry about that right now? Now, that doesn't mean you don't take action, but if we can just be present with your kids. Your kids want that more than any four-wheelers or BMWs or vacation houses. They don't want that shit. They want your presence. They want your attention. They want your love. They want to be seen and heard. And when you have these limiting beliefs, it's really hard. I was there. I understand it. It was hard to be present. I was thinking about my next business move and how I could make more money, or, going through the divorces once they were done, who's the next girl I'm going to date? So that next girl could validate me and make me whole. When
Yeah.
I was going to smoke weed, and like, it's a shit show. When you've got these limiting beliefs that are oftentimes hidden, it's really hard to operate in a state of presence and joy and love. But do the work and, man, things will change for you.
Yeah, that's literally why I enjoy these podcast interviews, is because I enter a flow state, which I find blissful, being just present in the moment, not thinking about, oh, I have this task and that task and this payment and whatever, right? It's just, I tend to live as an optimist, saying I want to live to 100 years, but I also constantly remind myself that that's not guaranteed, right? I don't know that for sure. And that reminds me to live every day more present. Life gets the best of us sometimes, but I try my best is definitely the truth.
Love it. And I agree with you. Like podcasting, I have a podcast called How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. It talks a lot about this stuff. And I'm in a flow state there too. I absolutely freaking love it.
Yeah. And I think it is easily noticed by others as well. It's not something that can be artificially replicated, right? It's something that you see it in that person. It's like, okay, they're there, they're present.
For sure.
Now, Brad, this show is called Learn or Be Learned. So I love to ask my guests this closing question, which is, what is one life lesson that you want to be the take on this episode?
That you don't have to do anything to prove your worth, because you already are worthy. The divine inside of you is your source of good. And if you're suffering, if you're struggling, no matter what anyone told you, that's not the way your life is supposed to be. You're supposed to be living an abundant life full of joyous and deep connections. And there's a pathway to get there. So whether I can help you or not, just take the first step. Go take the self-love quiz, or decide that, hey, I'm not going to live another day like this, and step into your power, because you're a miracle. You were put here for a massive reason and purpose, and just live in the truth. Because, not super religious, more spiritual now than religious, but, Jesus, the best saying ever, the truth shall set you free. If you're suffering, it's because you're living in the untruth. It's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you, my friend. You are enough.
Yeah. Like you said, it's feeling anxious and depressed and not well is not natural. It's not how we were meant to be, to have our human experience, right? We were meant to have the full spectrum of emotions, but we were also given the discernment to create the life that we want. And I think in order to do that, sometimes you just have to take that first step, which is find someone or make an effort to heal.
Boom.
Yeah. Well, Brad, thank you so much for being here. I really did enjoy this a lot.
Thank you. That was awesome.